Thank you so much, Chad, for joining us for the inaugural Trachtenberg School Executive in Residence Meet and Greet Series, where we have, for the fall of 2024, invited 3 of our alumni to serve as inaugural Executive in Residence to be able to share valuable insights with our students and our alumni. Chad Davis is the Vice President for Government Affairs at Cato Institute, and he is an MPP graduate from 2001. So I have some questions that I've asked you to talk about. We will cover that over
Okay.
the next 10-15 minutes. So the first one is just to provide a 2 to 3 minute introduction about your career, your work, and your career path.
Yeah. Thanks, Denise. Thanks for having me. Very happy to do this. GW is what brought me to DC. And so, in a lot of ways, that was probably the biggest move in my career, getting me started. So what brought me out here exposed me to a lot of different things. So very happy to do this and happy to work with folks that are there. So thank you. As you mentioned, I'm Vice President for Government Affairs at the Cato Institute. Or what that means, or one, if people aren't familiar with the Cato Institute, it's a think tank in Washington, D.C., devoted to advancing, it's a nonpartisan think tank devoted to advancing ideas around individual liberties, free market economics, and a peace around the world. Those are the main 3 pillars. Our folks bring a libertarian ideology to their work. And so our job in government affairs is to promote that work on Capitol Hill, within federal agencies. And we've now just also expanded and opened a new function for external affairs that we're building out that will also work with entities like embassies, universities, trade associations, companies, think tanks. So we are very much in the business of trying to promote the work that our scholars do, promote the scholars themselves, and really take the great work that they do and bring it out to a lot of different type of stakeholders. My career path, as I mentioned, started in graduate school at GW. Before that, I had received a bachelor's degree in economics, and I took those 2 um, uh, training tools and created a path that was a blend of policy and outward communications, and it really has kind of equipped me to get to where I am. I spent a bit of time as a junior lobbyist in a trade association. I spent a long time on Capitol Hill. I spent a few years on the House side in a personal office, a few years on the Senate side in a personal office, and then the bulk of my time there, I was with the Senate Banking Committee,
Mm.
handling a portfolio for that group. And then when I left Capitol Hill, spent time at 3 different federal agencies. I was a congressional liaison for the Board of Governors, the Federal Reserve, where I had a great opportunity to work with Chair Yellen and Chair Powell, as well as all of the various governors that were there at that time. From there, I went to FDIC, where I ran our congressional outreach, as well as our communications and our the entity, the ombudsman's office, that interacted with the banks when there would be problems with the agency. That was my first kind of large scale management opportunity. At that time, I led 3 teams that totaled about 50 people. So it was absolutely a crash course in leadership and management. From there, I went to the Federal Housing Finance Administration, or Federal Housing Finance Agency. That's the agency that supervises Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, who finance most of the mortgages in the country. After that, I ended up at the Cato Institute, and was brought on to build out a government affairs team. They had a small team here when I got here, There was about 4 people. We're now up to 11 with plans to get to about 15 by the end of the year, hopefully. So a pretty big expansion in that area over the last year and a half or so. And it's really allowed me to do what I enjoy the most, which is recruit and retain high quality people. And my experience has been whatever function you're in as you move up and you start moving into that, eventually everybody moves off the street, so to speak, and into the office where you're, mostly dealing with HR and hiring people and letting them do the good work that you used to enjoy being able to do. But luckily for me, I do enjoy this part of it as well, because that's the biggest part of the job right now. But that's kind of the quick summary of my path, and happy to answer any questions.
Fantastic. Well, let's go into some of these questions that all of our executive in residence will be answering. What have been the most pivotal moments in your career, and how did they shape your leadership approach?
Uh, I would say that the biggest pivotal moment was when I worked on the banking committee. I had the opportunity to work for two very good staff directors. One I worked with quite a long time, and I learned a lot of good leadership skills from them. I learned that the best way to get the most out of people is to be very selectful in who you hire. Take your time doing that, hire the right people. But then B, once you hire people, allow them to do their jobs. It's I've been around people that, fall into that micromanager type role that people talk about. I learned from people that was not a good approach. I also had the benefit of working for some very, very good people in the agencies as well. And again, my experience was that the people who had the most successful teams were the people that allowed those people to do the work. So you have to have accountability for sure. And you have to always stay in the loop as far as what's going on. But a lot of what I found my best role to be was to be the guy to make sure everybody was talking, everybody was working down the same path, but to allow the people to do the work that we hire them to do. And so, having those experiences kind of earlier, midway through, midway through the early part of my career was probably the biggest turning point. I think another big turning point was when I went to FDIC and began managing those large teams,
Mhm.
uh, because it allowed me to see how various functions interact together and how you can get synergies between, say, communications and government affairs. And I think that's applicable to a lot of careers in that when you recognize the benefits of various functions working together, even if you don't manage them all, then I think overall it makes your groups more effective and makes the organization more effective as well.
Fantastic. So on the other side, how have you navigated some challenges or setbacks in your career? And what advice, now that you're on the other side of them, would you give to people and how to overcome them?
Uh, well, I guess kind of the biggest setbacks. I lost one job because the member I worked for lost re-election, and I lost another job because the leader of the organization was a political appointee and got fired when the next administration came in. So, losing a job is never fun, but it can allow you to really kind of assess what it is you want to do next, with a little bit of time that perhaps you don't have while you're in a role. And so I won't spin it necessarily as an exciting thing when you get fired, but it does allow you to
Mhm.
uh, have a little bit clearer head to think about what you want to do next. So, those were probably the two biggest setbacks for me. But both of them ended up putting me into positions that I was very happy that I ended up in. And so it make lemonade out of lemon, so to speak.
Wow.
I think that the lessons to take away from that are, um, even when you have those setbacks, try to think about how you can use those setbacks to create a positive outcome down the road.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's what you're describing happens very frequently. A lot of our students and alumni are in these roles where you have a shift of administration and things change. What do you think differentiates you as a leader, and how has your leadership style evolved over time? What factors have influenced that evolution?
And I'm sorry, my speaker cut out for a moment there.
That's okay. What do you think differentiates you as a leader, and how has your leadership style evolved, and what's influenced that evolution?
Yeah, so the I think some of what I talked about before probably is the biggest difference. I think that everybody has their style on how they lead. Outside of work, my main hobby is probably coaching. I've got two boys, one 13, one 9. And so, I've been coaching some sort of sport for most of the last decade.
Mm.
And even before that, when I was in college, I originally thought I was going to be a history teacher and a basketball coach. And so I had coached some when I was in college as well. And so I think that's the type of style and approach that I take to leadership is more of the coach than the sergeant, so to speak. I again, you do have to have accountability. But I had a former boss who was former military, and even he told me that he didn't see the value in one adult yelling at another adult. Um, and uh, and so you sometimes have to have tough conversations, but um, the coach style approach that I believe I bring to the table is what I think is best fits my personality. And the type of people that I tend to hire, and in some ways, if you go into government affairs, you go into communications, you are external affairs as well. You are already an outgoing person that likes to be around people and likes to be in conversations and likes to be out there meeting people. And so, I think the leadership style that works best with the people that self-select into those fields is support and advice more than even direction. You have to give direction at a high level, but especially with senior people, um, the people on my teams have to be able to think strategically on their own because they have to make decisions on their feet when they're out in very public settings. And so, uh, if people get used to only executing what a leader tells them to do, then I think it's harder for them to develop those strategic skills that are necessary for the role. So the coaching style, I think, lends itself a lot more to the type of work that I do. You support, you come up with a game plan, and then you allow your people to go out and move on that game plan.
Great. And the last question, and I think you've addressed some of this, so, or not, so I'll let you close out with this one is either, what is one leadership lesson you wish you learned earlier in your career, or is there one piece of advice that you received that you're like, this one really resonated, this one hit the mark?
Well, some of it we talked about, my management styles I learned pretty early and have benefited from that. Um, a couple pieces of advice I got and that I think anybody around here looking at careers in DC could benefit from. One, if you're going to get bad news, give it as early as you can.
Mm.
The good news, people can wait and they get good news, they're still happy. People never enjoy bad news, but if you have to wait on bad news, I think it makes it worse. So if you have bad news to deliver, whether it's to somebody on your team or whether it's to who you're working with or whether it's to your boss, don't procrastinate on that. Don't wait on that. Deliver it as early as you can. And be respectful, but be direct in how you do it. Nobody likes to sit there and hear a wandering lead up and you've already figured out what the bad news is, but it hasn't been delivered yet. So, that was a piece of advice that I got maybe a little bit later that I think I would have benefited from kind of out of the gate. The other one, uh, always the first priority, anytime when you're deciding who to respond to, it is the scheduler or the administrative assistant of the principal, because you never want to be on his or her bad side.
That's great. Well, with this, I want to thank you very much. You are, as I said, our inaugural meet and greet for our inaugural executive in residence. I always love hearing advice from alumni that have been out in the field for a while, that are a little more seasoned. So I want to thank you, Chad, so much for your time today, and encourage anybody who is watching this to go check out the Trachtenberg School's website under Executive in Residence, and there's a form there that you can fill out so you can have an opportunity during this fall semester to schedule a 30-minute informational interview with Chad to hear a little bit more about his career path, his advice, how to be a great coach, his work at Cato, and anything related to his leadership journey. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate doing this.